am the one who shines through you when you leave me room.
Cancer, selflessness towards catharsis. Hello everyone. I'd like to offer something for this month's virtue practice. Selflessness is one of those virtues that perhaps using the polarities helps us to understand more deeply. Because when we think of selflessness, it's very easy to consider this to be more of that nature of lacking a I capacity, lacking a sense of self. But rather, if we consider it in relationship to selfishness, where we recognize in the selfishness a certain hardened I experience, where I am filled with myself, and then we oppose that with the opposite diversion of the weakened I experience, where I'm really filled with the other, that type of nature of self that leads to infatuation, where I don't know myself, or I live in the soul of the other so strongly that I lose myself. So selflessness is not the loss of self in the weakened I, and it is not that obvious hardened I where I'm just full of myself, but it is something that stands between those two in this living dynamic. Like most virtues, we are brought to something that instructs us about this deep wisdom of the esoteric path. It's very easy to be pulled to the opposite of the virtue that we understand, but it's in recognizing the two swings of the pendulum that we begin to learn about the virtue that lives in the middle. And selflessness is this dynamic where we're not closed to the world, nor are we lost to the world. And in this selflessness, we begin to gather this contemplation. The next thing that we can consider in this virtue is where it's working towards, catharsis. Now, catharsis is this release or this purification, this cleanse or clarification of these deeper repressed aspects of ourself. Now, usually in the realm of selfishness, being full of myself, I recognize my shadow. I recognize the shadow nature in me that is obvious. And when I am lost to the world, infatuated or filled with the other, with my weakened I can also sense a kind of shadow nature that wants to lack responsibility in that way of being. It's not my fault, it's what the other has drawn me to do, whatever we might call that. But when we consider this selflessness that leads to catharsis, that leads to purification, it instructs us of something, of what this middle eye activity works with, when it's not hardened in its selfishness and it's not weakened and being filled with the other. It stands in this selflessness that allows for very deep release or purification of those shadow aspects that are so very hard for us to perceive or see. the shadow aspects that cause us difficulty or discord, those obvious ones that keep coming up to face us, causing the pain and suffering, or those imbalances in our life, they're more clarified on the surface. But how do we find those deeper processes, those hidden repressed aspects of the shadow? And that's in this word catharsis. So it's this selflessness, the activity of virtue through selflessness, that leads to this deeper purification, this deeper catharsis. But it's not through a purification that is intentional, that I permeate myself in working through, but rather as a purification that happens through not putting myself as the center. Now that's not an easy thing to think of when we work on the inner development path, because we are commonly working with this idea that we have to, in a way, look at ourselves, work upon ourselves. And the virtue tells us this: if I work selflessly with the world, not in my hardened eye, not in my weakened eye, but in that central place, then that's where this deeper purification, this deeper release can take place. We get to see, through the activity of selflessness, those very deep parts of our being that we are yet to see, that need to go through that transformation, that need to cleanse. So we can now begin in that thought, and there are many ways to penetrate the virtues, but in that thought of working with selflessness to catharsis, we get a slight orientation towards the nature of this selflessness. And in that way, I'd like to also bring another one of the exercises that begins this entry into the mystery center of the heart. We focus on the pineal gland, the third eye, concentrate our energy there, so that we enter through this death to the personal particular self, and that we might concentrate our awareness to the higher I. But these words that Rudolf Steiner gave are helping us to understand the nature of our relationship to that higher I. So the concentration is impersonal higher I. How often is it that when we sense a different reality of consciousness, when we experience that observer or onlooker, or that capacity to lay aside our everyday self, we then create a new attachment to the higher I experience through our personal longing to identify. And so these words, impersonal higher I, can be very helpful. And as usual, we concentrate firstly on the exercise that puts our everyday self to one side. Impersonal higher I. And then slowly and consciously, we bring our awareness through the third eye down behind the eyes, towards the back of the head, down the spine, slowly centering in the region behind the heart. And we enter this doorway, this mystery centre of the heart, through this new doorway. Selflessness. In this place, we try to imbue ourselves, to unite ourselves with this virtue, to become one with it, so there's no division between our own consciousness and the experience. Selflessness. And for those of you that are following the verse connected to the zodiac, you could take that further in your contemplation. You rest in luminous glow, engender warmth of life, enwarm the life of soul, to meet with vigour each test, and permeate itself with spirit, in quiet light outstreaming, you luminous glow, gain strength. Again, we would go back then to extinguishing the words, being inward with just the activity, either the resonance of the words or the resonance of the virtue, selflessness.
I am the one who shines through you.